Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make some kielbasa bowls, which is Polish sausage with some oven roasted potatoes, sauteed cabbage, some peppers and onions, and then we're going to bake up some sourdough yeast rolls with kind of a herby onion butter. All right, so let's start by getting our potatoes prepped up to go into the oven. I'm going to kind of cut them a little bit smaller because I want them to kind of cook up in this like 35-minute time that we have. Today is going to be a quicker meal, I think. Yeah, I always say that and it ends up longer than I anticipate. My children always say I have time blindness. So I'm using some Yukon Gold potatoes for this. They actually, I think, will just pair really well with the sausages because they're just kind of a bit richer potato, a bit more waxy. And so I think they'll go great with this dish. There we go. And I'm just kind of cubing them up into it. Not terribly, just a small little bit smaller than a dice. We'll get this one, and then we're going to toss them with some olive oil, some spices, and then we'll kind of lay them out on our baking tray and let them start cooking up in our oven. I have my oven preheated to 375 because that's what my rolls are going to cook at. Let's see, I think let me do one more. Get this. Last one down, and then onto the baking tray they'll go. Now you just want to make sure you use a large enough baking tray that they'll have enough room to have their own spot on the tray. So I'm just using a full sheet here, but sometimes if I'm doing a larger batch of potatoes, I'll use my 1.5 sheet pan. That way they can all have time on the sheet to crisp up. So let's get these guys on here. And then I'm just going to kind of put everything in a big pile here. That way we can coat them up with the spices. Grab my oil over here. So I'm going to coat them with about, I want to say maybe 1.5 tablespoons of oil. I want enough to really get them on there so they crisp up nicely. And then we're going to use some onion powder. This will give it a nice savory flavor. I'm going to shake on about 1 teaspoon or so. Couple good shakes. And we're going to use some Mrs. Dash's table blend, which is kind of a finer ground spice, but I love it because it's a little bit of everything, but it's salt free. And we're going to use about 1 teaspoon of that as well. And then we're going to use a little bit of garlic salt here. And we're going to shake over probably around 1 teaspoon as well. And then I'm just going to go in with my fingers and we're just going to kind of coat everything up with these spices on the potatoes and really coat them up with that oil. And then we'll kind of spread them out and then let them roast. Okay. You can see that oil just helps all those spices kind of stick on them. Here we go. I'm going to try to give as much space between the potatoes so that they all can crisp up nicely. And then give my hands a quick rinse and we'll pop these in the oven. Okay, so I have my oven preheated to 375 degrees. And these are going to take about 35 minutes to do. So they'll be the last thing to come out of the oven. We're going to start them on the top, but when I put my rolls in, I'll move them to the side. Okay, so now we are going to prep up our rolls because they need to go into the oven, and then we'll start prepping up our cabbage and our peppers and onions and all that jazz. So we're going to melt some butter in our dish here. I have my rolls. I'm just using onions and all that jazz. So we're going to melt some butter in our dish here. I have my rolls. I've just used my basic sourdough yeast rolls base that I have. And I'm going to melt about 2 tablespoons of butter in here. And I made those rolls about an hour ago, and right now they're in my oven proofing. It's the wrong burner. Here we go. So we're going to let that melt. But this is such a really simple recipe that doesn't require a huge amount of wait time, like rise and press down or whatnot. It's about like an hour between before you start to bake it. So you make it up, you let it rise for about 30 minutes or so, and then you shape them, and then you let it rise again for anywhere between 15 and 45 minutes. It's one that can go, you can go quicker or sooner. Must have knocked all over. But super easy. This has a half a cup of my sourdough discard in it, but the actual like kind of leavening method in it is the yeast. It has 2¼ teaspoon of yeast. So that kind of helps kind of pop it up, but you still get those benefits of sourdough in it. Let's get to our butter over here. And what I'm going to do is this butter, we are going to brush it over the top. And this is going to give our rolls a nice kind of brownish color to it. And we're going to season this butter up with some onion powder. We're going to add parsley in there and garlic salt. And then we will sprinkle over the top with some poppy seeds. So I'm going to add in about, I want to say like a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of onion powder. It's going to give a nice savory flavor to it. The parsley flakes will just give it a pretty look. They don't add much flavor. And then we're going to add in about, a half a teaspoon or so of garlic salt. There we go. And then I'm going to just turn this down nice and low. We're going to give this a nice little brush. That butter should be melted soon. And then we're going to brush it over the top, and then I'll take my poppy seeds and we'll kind of sprinkle that over the top of these. And this is going to just give it some nice, lovely flavor on the top that I think will pair really well with our savory meal. And if there's there'll be a little bit of this butter left over, which we can kind of drizzle over the top of our rolls when they're done baking. Okay. Turn off my thing. So I'm just going to brush them. And the kind of the butter on it is kind of, that play on those onion rolls you can get. That nice onion flavor will just be delicious with them. And we're just going to kind of really coat all around. There we go. And I'll say a little bit of butter can go a long way. And this, again, that butter is going to allow the rolls to get a nice kind of golden brown, darker brown color. And now that we have it coated with our butter, we're going to sprinkle it with a little bit of poppy seeds. And the butter should help them kind of stick. Let me give them a good shake up. There we go. And just a little shake.
Are these frozen rolls or made from scratch?
These are made from scratch. This is my sourdough discard yeast rolls. So they have a half a cup of sourdough discard in it, and then they use a yeast on it. So these are kind of my base rolls that I have on there. The video will be uploaded on here, so you'll be able to kind of follow. But I think for our members, we have a recipe card out there. These are the same as my honey butter rolls, the bases, but I'm doing a different kind of topping on it instead of honey butter. But we do have that recipe card out for my members there. So we're going to go pop these in the oven and let them kind of bake up. I love these rolls because that base is so versatile, so you can really change it up with different things to give it different flavors. Let me grab my oven mitt because I got to bring those potatoes down. I'm going to see, though. I think I can actually get them both. That way they're both sharing that top heat. Potatoes, like bread or baked goods, really need to be on the top rack. Okay. So now I'm going to set my timer for about 26 minutes. And that way it will give me they are not going to be done until closer to 30, but it will give me a minute or two to get over there. So I'm not necessarily rushing. Okay, let's get on our next step here. So let's start prepping our vegetables to saute up. I'm going to actually start with my onions and pepper, and then we'll pull them out and reserve them to the side. Normally, I would use a yellow onion because I find that red onions aren't as nice for cooking, but I am all out of my yellow onions, and for some reason, I have like 10 red onions in my onion drawer. So we're going to use this. It will work fine, but again, a yellow onion is always best. So, because those flavors stay longer and they caramelize up a little bit. But a red onion is better than no onion. And I'm going to do a slightly kind of thicker chop on these. And then we're going to have them start kind of chopping or sauteing up in our pan. I'm going to turn my heat on to about a 7. And I'm going to drizzle a little bit of oil in here so that these can start kind of sauteing up in that oil while we prep the cabbage or the peppers and the onions. Or they got my peppers. So I've got these guys going in. And let's grab some tongs. I always just like to kind of coat them up in this oil first. And then I'll just do a couple smacks on them to help break them apart. And then we'll let them kind of start to saute up. Okay, so our peppers today, I've got some bell peppers here. Well, these are sweet peppers. And then I have one bell pepper from my garden. This is my first thing. I harvested a couple tomatoes, but my first pepper of the year. And let's get these guys nice and cut up. I typically like sweet peppers over bell peppers. And the funny thing is when I bought these plants, that was supposed to be a purple pepper, but I think somehow I got a bell pepper plant instead. Because green bell peppers are my least favorite because I find they're the most bitter of the peppers. So I typically stick with just the yellow, oranges, and reds. I'm going to do, again, kind of a thicker slice or chop on these similar to my onions. And this will be like an onion and pepper part of our bowl. And then, here we go. I can already smell the onions cooking up. They smell so lovely. And then our Polish sausage today we're using, Kielbasa Polish sausage is actually from a deli in Minneapolis. So every year my brothers get my stepdad like a huge order of these Polish sausage because they're his favorite. And he's from Minneapolis. And since I do all the cooking for them, they live in my, freezer, and I take them out here and then. But they're from like Kramarskis or something like that in Minnesota. But they are, I have to say, out of all the Polish sausage I've ever had, they are the best. And they're from a Polish deli there. And I think they're, special for my stepdad because he is Polish. Both of his parents were Polish. And so they're kind of, a little taste of home or, his family growing up. His mother, my step-grandmother, who was practically my grandmother, she, I went to her since I was little, but she taught me how to make golbaki, which is Polish cabbage rolls. And I actually have a video of that up. We made that in the beginning of the summer. But there was just some of those foods every time I visited. I always had Polish sausage and I always had golbaki. And it was like the same, salami sandwiches. They'd always go to this special bakery there. We'd get their like rye breads. And then they had this rainbow bread growing up. That was just so good. That's one of my the memories of visiting them up in Minneapolis was going to the bakery with the rainbow bread. And it's funny because I've met, a person later in life who was from Minnesota. And she was like, I went to that same bakery as a kid. And I was like, I know, they were famous for their rainbow bread. Okay, let's give this a nice little, things are kind of cooking up nicely. Now, since these aren't yellow onions, I'm not going to cook them quite as long as I would, because these are going to lose their flavor a lot quicker than a yellow onion. So I'm going to actually, they're already starting to go translucent. So I'm going to throw in my peppers now. That way they'll stay nice and kind of, they'll keep their flavors, and they'll also have a nice little, firmness to them. Get these tossing. They'll be pretty though. The red onions will be pretty in there. Although if you've ever noticed it, the more you cook the red onion, the whiter and paler it gets. It loses its color. It dulls out. Here we go. And we're going to have that kind of sauteing and searing up. While we're doing that, I'm going to prep our cabbage for our braised cabbage. And I will say, sauteed cabbage is one of my favorite things. And I know it's kind of different, but I absolutely love it. So I'm going to use a little bit of this, and then I have some purple cabbage as well, and we'll use a little bit of that. That way we can have kind of two colors. Makes it a little bit more fun. When I was a kid, we used to eat a whole bunch of, we used to eat cabbage raw. I loved it. And then we used to eat how much purple cabbage we could eat before our tongue turned purple. I think now as a grown, I think that was just a way to get us to eat our vegetables and, get us to eat cabbage, but it worked. So I'm just kind of slicing it thin and then kind of cutting each one, because I don't want them to be too big. I'd like them to be a little bit more stringy for our bowl. There we go. And then I'm just going to mix them together so when they go into it. Although I will tell you one thing, if you've ever made a cabbage soup with with the vegetables, purple cabbage will turn your broth like a dark bluish, kind of purplish color, which I think is kind of cool. I'm going to go wash my hands real quick. Okay. Give this a nice toss. I'm going to season these up, but again, not till the end, because if you put your seasonings on in the beginning, a lot of times they'll fall off and they'll stick to the pan, and then they won't be as delicious. Let me check back and see my time here. Okay. You got good timing. It's keeping me on track. Okay. So this Polish sausage is already pre-cooked, but we're going to saute it up in the pan. Now, the way to make your sausages look a little bit more fancy when you cut them is I'm going to start by cutting off these little nubs. And then if you cut at a diagonal versus flat, they're just going to look a little bit more fancy. So we're going to cut them, and then we'll saute them up with butter to get that nice kind of crispy flavor on it. This this deli also. So we'd get head cheese there and salami when growing up. And head cheese, most people in America have never heard of a head cheese. But my mom's Swedish. Yeah, my mom's, they still bring us back some. It is not a cheese. And it is very interesting. It's literally made from the leftover parts of, I believe, a pig. And it has a gelatin type texture. My mom absolutely loves it. My stepdad loves it. I mean, it's okay. I wouldn't write home about it, though. And I definitely don't need it. I mean, when it's there, I definitely will have a slice because, it's something weird. A lot of times we'll put it on our smorgasbord, which is the Swedish kind of feast that we do at Christmas time.
What thing did you ever cook with it?
With head cheese, no, I've only eaten it as like on sandwiches. So I didn't even know you could cook with it. It's not one of those things I've done a lot of research on. It was something I ate growing up, like once a year. There we go. We got this nice little kind of char going up on it. And the best way to get this char on your vegetables to get that kind of flame cooked is to have your skillet on high, but to not rotate your vegetables a lot, to let them sit on that heat. That's going to give you that quick little char on there. Gives you a lot of flavor and depth. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of garlic salt over these. There we go. And then we're going to give them a good toss, and then I'm going to pull these out and kind of put them in a bowl. There we go. And again, I'm cooking them to where they're firm but tender, and they'll have all that bitterness will be gone in their taste that fresh vegetables tend to have. But they'll still have a little bit of firmness to them. I don't want them to be super soft. I'm going to actually put my bowl on my warming center. So one thing that's really cool about, let's see, here we go. That having a warming center, if you use ceramic like dishes, you can place those on the warming center and it will heat up, and it's as if you have like a warming plate. So that's kind of a nice thing when you're cooking.
Yeah, do you prefer garlic salt to garlic powder?
Yes. I find garlic powder has a weird texture for me. I feel like it's gritty. And so even if you try to mix garlic powder and salt together to make garlic salt, it's not the same. Versus garlic salt has, salt that has been in garlic juice that has then been dehydrated. Okay, we've got our peppers and onions here. And, I turned off my warming thing. So we're going to let them sit on the warming plate. That will keep them nice and hot. And then we're going to do our braised cabbage here. I cook my braised cabbage with butter, or my fried cabbage with butter because it tastes better. You want those kind of flavors in there. And I'm going to cook them right in this pan with my onion, where it has all those good flavors from the onions and peppers. You could throw in some, bacon in here if you wanted it as well. That would add up like a nice flavor. But we're just keeping it simple today. And I will say, and I think it's, because my mom was Swedish or whatnot, but I love fried cabbage. And I don't think a lot of people ate fried cabbage growing up. But in Sweden, they have a lot of like cabbages, potatoes, kind of root vegetables because, it's so cold there and their growing season is short. And I just love it. I love pickled cabbage too, and pickled beets. They're all things I grew up eating that most people don't. There we go. So we're going to put our cabbage in here. Now I'm going to turn my burner on to about a 6. We're going to let this kind of start to saute up. I'm going to first turn my cabbage all around in the butter. And then once I have it coated with butter, I'm actually going to add in a little bit of oil because that oil will keep that butter from burning on there. But I want that flavor of the butter. So I kind of use a half and half mixture, and I think it works really well. So we're going to drizzle just about a teaspoon and a half of oil in here. There we go.
Yeah, question. Have you tried pickled asparagus?
I have had pickled asparagus. It's actually really common in Germany, and I did a foreign exchange in Germany, so I lived there for a while, and it's called Spargel. And their asparagus there is so funny, but their pickled asparagus is white. Spargel. I guess gotta say it in my German accent. I always, whenever I talk, 'cause I have family that lives in Germany as well. They're not Germans. My husband has German ancestry, but my family is Swedish, and my grandfather was a nuclear physicist. So he was in Sweden, then he was in America, then he was in Germany, and then in Italy, and then back in Germany. So he kind of lived all over, but they settled down there um, when my mom was like 16 or so. And then she's crazy. And then she moved to England to finish up schooling, and then she moved back to America for college and her doctorate and all that jazz. Okay. I'm going to have it cooking over this. Now let's get our kielbasa starting to cook. Let me check my time. Perfect. So I'm going to turn on, and we're going to kind of let my butter melt here. I'm going to bring it up over. And then I'm going to grab my strawberries out of my fridge. So that's going to be our fruit tonight. We'll have our strawberries. And we never got to our donut nectarines yesterday, so we're going to have those. Let me rinse my strawberries real quick. He is doing really good. Today, he woke up. He was a little bit rough this morning, but it's just getting those meds in him. And it took about 2 rounds of like alternating with ibuprofen and Tylenol for him to get over the hump. But he drank a lot of liquid today, which I was really, really proud of him. And then he ate a whole scallop at lunch for our scallop mac and cheese. And he had a couple of noodles. He ate a banana muffin, so he's eating a little bit more. And then after soccer, I took the girls to Starbucks as usual. They just love it. And he asked for a cake pop and a coffee cake, and he had a little bit of each one before his younger brother came out and stole his food. So he's actually doing really, really well. And he actually was telling me when I was trying to give him another round of medicine that he didn't hurt anymore, so he didn't need it. And I was like, buddy, if we stop it, you're going to be back into pain until, because I'd say it's pretty young. But a lot of times when he's eating, he complains that his ears hurt from the tonsillectomy. And I was like, yeah, there's just a lot of swelling up there for it. Let's get this going, letting that butter cook. So I have these cooking over about a 5, and then I'll kind of turn them. I want them to kind of crisp up a little bit or get a nice little sear on it. Once my butter is melted and like that pan is hot, we'll throw our sausages in, our kielbasa in to let it kind of I'm going to grab a bowl here and we'll start cutting up our fruit. Grab a little knife here. So I've got my strawberries. We're going to slice these up. And then I've got donut nectarines. So I saw both donut peaches and nectarines at the store. And they're kind of short and squat, look like donuts. So I had never had them. So I was like, let's try them. I'm always big on having all the kids try new fruits because you never know. You find something and you like it. We'll get these guys cut up. But I do like to get fresh fruit for my kids. At least when I cook 2 meals a day for the kids, and then they have to fend for themselves for 1 meal a day. And so I always make sure that we have fresh fruit at our meals because otherwise the kids aren't going to just naturally grab it. They're going to grab for our plethora of snacks or baked goods we have. And I think it's funny because growing up, I never really had fresh fruit at dinner, but I always make sure I have fresh fruit at dinner, like to get them to eat the fruit. But I am not a short order cook. My kids have to eat what I make, whether they like it or not. And so there's always going to be someone who grumbles about something, mainly Evie. She's my biggest food critic. But if I always have fresh fruit or grain on there, their bellies are going to get full rather than, for them going hungry. And I think it's worked out pretty well that, so all of my kids pretty much eat my food except Evie. Okay, our butter looks like it's nice and hot. There we go. Let's add in our kielbasa. And since this is already cooked, we're just really just sauteing it up to have that nice kind of crispy edge on it. You could throw these on the grill. A lot of times growing up, my stepdad used to wrap them in aluminum foil and bake them in the oven, which would keep a lot of their moisture in, which would keep them really, really juicy. There we go. And these are not one that I worry about overcrowding the pan. That's not going to be so much of an issue here. Like with the scallops earlier today at lunch, when we made our scallop mac and cheese, I wanted to make sure each one of those scallops had its own spot on the pan so that it would not get like, they wouldn't let out all their juices and stuff. We're going to add a little bit of garlic salt to our cabbage. So a nice little shake over it. And then I'm going to add a little bit of onion powder. And this is just going to make it a nice, really savory flavor on there. And again, it's going to be delicious. So we're going to mix this in.
You have a question? How was the scallop mac and cheese?
Oh, it was excellent. Even like Lena was saying, she's like, this is so good. She goes, I ate like 10 scallops. And I was like, I know, because Torn came back. He wanted seconds on scallops because I made every kid had to take like 5 first. And he was like, there was only 1 left. And I was like, you snooze, you lose. Give these a little bit of a toss. But yeah, no, they all went well. Even Jack ate 2 scallops. And I said Teddy was able to get a scallop down. And luckily, it's a soft food. So that was kind of one of the reasons why I'm like, oh, he can eat that. It will give him some protein.
Do you have a cookbook?
I do not have a cookbook. I've been asked a lot about having a cookbook. So I'm definitely thinking about getting a cookbook. But what I do offer is recipe cards for our members. And so we about like once a week, we update about 3 recipe cards a week with different recipes that I've cooked recently in there. So that's kind of my bridge way, but I am definitely thinking about considering doing a cookbook. Okay, let's cut up our nectarines here. I'm going to have to taste one, guys, because I've never had a donut one. Ooh, these are really good. They're not as tart as a regular nectarine. My husband needed one as well. But they're really good. They're like sweeter than a nectarine and not as tart. I will have to say these are delicious. I think my kids are definitely going to love these. Not as easy to cut though. This little donut thing in there is not the easiest. You got that, since it's a stone fruit, it has, that pit in the middle.
Got a couple more comments about people loving your apron.
Oh, thank you. This apron, this is my $5 apron from IKEA, which I got just going there, and I looked at it and I was like, ooh, I like this. And it was on sale and I love it to death. Every time I see an IKEA, I have to swing by because it's Swedish. And of course, I got to support my Swedish heritage there. And I always go through and because, you can buy some things online from IKEA, but most of the stuff you actually have to buy in store. They don't ship like all their little cool knickknacks, which I love. I will say, if you have an IKEA, go to it. They have a really good food court. You'll get some good Swedish meatballs. Love them. But they have cute little aprons there. I've got 2 of my aprons from there, and everybody comments about it. And I'm just like, it's the $5 apron, but it's the winner, not my like Headley and Bennett aprons. It's the $5 one. Should have bought more. I know. And I'm like, next time I'm like always sitting there because, the closest IKEA for us is in Memphis. And I'm always like, oh, when are my kids going to have another soccer tournament there? Because that's when I always make the kids, we go there. And then our drive home, the day we drive home, we swing by there because I load up on the frozen Swedish meatballs. Although I do make really good Swedish meatballs, I don't buy a lot of pre-made foods, but I do have frozen Swedish meatballs in my freezer as an emergency. I don't want to cook when we get home meal. Okay, so there's our donut nectarines and strawberries. So we've got a pretty delicious fruit bowl. And our rolls are just about to come out. So give this a nice little stir. There we go. And we can start heading to the oven because that timer is going to beep in just a second here. Got it off. And let those sizzle up. Now I will say Polish sausages, if you've never had them, or kielbasa, they are not like a hot dog or a bratwurst. They have a nice flavoring to them. They're seasoned up. Look at this, is looking gorgeous. So let me grab these out and then we'll come back for our potatoes. Cancel that off. But these are our yeast sourdough discard rolls. So I'm going to slide these right up here and then I'm going to grab my potatoes and we will be ready to eat. Okay. So our sourdough discard yeast rolls are, they have a half a cup of discard in them. And then you use about, 2 teaspoons and a quarter bit of yeast and you mix them together. They do about a 30-minute rise before you shape them. And I always divide mine into 12, but you could make them smaller if you wanted to. And then you let them rise for anywhere between 15 and 45 minutes. Then we brush them with this nice seasoning thing that was butter, onion powder, garlic, salt, parsley, and then sprinkled them with the poppy seeds to kind of tie into the Polish things. I always think of kolaches from there. It's a delicious dessert made with poppy seeds, but they're so good, and I absolutely love it. These rolls, that base can be done in so many different ways that they're just kind of delicious. I'm trying to decide. This is kind of going to be my Polish sausage bowl. And let's get here. Let me slide everything over here. So we're going to assemble our bowl on here. So let me grab this because this is going to be a little bit hot. What I'm going to do, I'm going to slide my spatula underneath these potatoes. And you want to do it while it's still hot because look at these beautiful crispy edges underneath. So we're going to slide these under. That way, if you wait until they cool, a lot of times they'll act like concrete and they will stick to the bottom of your pan. So while that pan is still hot, just use a thin spatula and firmly scrape underneath them. But I do like to cook on the metal versus putting a parchment paper down because I think it gives a better crisp.
Do you have a question? Where's the roll recipe?
The roll recipe we have posted for our members. So this roll recipe is the same as my honey butter roll, but instead of using honey butter, I made a butter using onion powder, parsley, garlic, salt, and then we sprinkle a little bit of poppy seeds on top. And we have those for our members. Every week we release about 3 recipe cards for them. Okay, let's build our things. I got my hands on backwards. Okay, so for our Polish sausage bowl, we're going to start by putting a nice kind of base of our potatoes down. Then I'm going to slide them over. So we've got our potatoes and our sauteed cabbage, both green and purple cabbage that we seasoned with garlic, salt, and onion powder. We have our sauteed peppers and onions. We use 2 sweet peppers, a bell pepper, and then some red onions. And now we're going to top it off with our Polish sausage, which is actually from a Polish deli in Minnesota, which is delicious. We sliced it up and fried it in a little bit of butter to give it that nice flavor. And now we'll have it with one of our beautiful sourdough yeast rolls for a simple and delicious dinner. And of course, we'll have our donut nectarines and our strawberries as our fruit to finish off our meal. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making for our family, and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you can always go to those videos, watch again, and recreate them at home by watching me along again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our cooking gear in it. I have my spatulas, my frying pans, my baking sheets, cutting boards, knives, everything that I use in my kitchen, I have in my storefront for you guys to check out if you're interested. Well, guys, thanks again for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.